On August 26, 2026, we got a truly stark, devastating reminder of our planet's unbridled power. It struck right in the heart of the rugged Himalayas, right near the Nepal-China border. A massive ice and rock collapse essentially triggered this catastrophic chain reaction that literally in an instant rewrote the entire landscape. In today's analysis, we're going to unpack the science, the terrifying scale, and the very real human reality of this disaster. Imagine this. With almost zero warning, this violent roar echoes through the steep mountains. Then a massive wall of water, churning with huge rocks and thick mud, comes absolutely tearing down a narrow valley. It's like something out of a cinematic documentary. But tragically, it was entirely real. This wasn't just a flood. It was a high-speed freight train of heavy debris that completely overwhelmed the river system. It wiped out everything in its path before locals had any time to react. All right, let's get into the specifics. Section 1, the August 26th catastrophe, focusing on ground zero at the Nepal-China border. So, ground zero for this disaster was concentrated around Nepal's Rasua district and the neighboring Tibet region over in China. Now, as you can see, both of these areas share some incredibly tough geography. We're talking towering peaks and really deep, narrow valleys. But crucially, this isn't just some remote, isolated area. It's a vital international transit route. So when a disaster strikes here, it severs a critical artery for trade and movement, completely trapping the local communities that rely on it. Moving on to Section 2, Anatomy of the Surge. Let's look at exactly how a mountain collapses. So how does a collapse actually translate into this kind of massive destruction? Well, it's basically a cascading failure that started way up in the peaks. First, you have this colossal chunk of ice, stone, and earth collapsing at a really high altitude. Second, that enormous mass plummets and violently crashes right into the riverbed. And finally, because these steep valleys essentially act like a giant funnel, all that water and debris gets forced into a really tight space. It accelerates into this high-velocity surge racing toward the lower elevations. Scientifically speaking, this was not your traditional water flood. It was what experts call a debris surge. Because of the sheer density of massive boulders and thick mud suspended in the water, the surge literally acted as a mechanical battering ram. The kinetic energy of this fast-moving, rock-filled slurry was so intense that it violently pulverized concrete and just snapped the steel infrastructure standing in its way. Which brings us to a very somber Section 3, devastation and human toll, the tragic aftermath. 469. As of August 28th, that was the confirmed death toll in Nepal alone. It's just a heartbreaking figure, right? It really grounds us in the stark reality of this event. But we have to remember, this is not the final number. With so many people still reported missing and search efforts ongoing in a highly fluid, chaotic environment, no single figure can capture the absolute finality of this tragedy just yet. And beyond that tragic loss of human life, the surge resulted in shattered infrastructure on a massive, massive scale. We're talking severed border roads, heavy bridges that were utterly destroyed, crushed buildings. This level of physical destruction has entirely disrupted those vital international trade routes between Nepal and Tibet. It's turned an already dire situation into a complete logistical nightmare for the rescuers. Let's look at those efforts in Section 4, Rescue in the Himalayas, an absolute race against time. With ground access completely wiped out, the only viable path in was from the sky. Authorities have had to rely heavily on daring aerial operations. You have these rescue helicopters navigating incredibly tight, treacherous mountain passes, operating over some of the most difficult mountainous terrain imaginable. Pilots are hovering over ruined, unstable ground just to drop supplies or hoist survivors to safety. It is a massive testament to the bravery of these crews flying into a disaster zone where you literally can't trust the ground below you. Because let's be clear, these rescue teams are up against monumental challenges. They're operating in a freshly torn-apart landscape with zero ground access. The teams that actually deploy to the surface are walking on highly unstable mud and loose debris. It presents severe, life-threatening risks to the rescuers themselves. Every single mission they take is a highly calculated risk. Section 5. Looming Threats and Science. Looking ahead at an unstable future. You know, the terrifying part is that the danger didn't just pass without initial surge. Up in the higher elevations, massive landslides have dumped thousands of tons of debris into the riverbeds, creating these dangerous, unnatural dams. So now, you have the immediate danger that just happened versus this new looming danger. If the pressure behind these new blockages builds up and one suddenly bursts, a massive secondary flash flood could be unleashed on the exact same valleys below. Continuous monitoring is absolutely crucial right now. We tend to think of mountains as these permanent, static rock formations, right? Actually, scratch that. The Himalayas are one of the world's most active and hypersensitive regions. We're talking active glaciers, shifting permafrost, and incredibly steep slopes. The geological makeup here means the landscape is perpetually undergoing massive changes. It is an environment that is just, by its very nature, volatile. Naturally, questions immediately arise about why this happened. Scientists are closely studying the potential role of climate change and rising global temperatures here. However, to remain objective, experts state that climate change cannot yet be solely blamed for triggering this specific collapse. The real cause is a highly complex mix of natural geology and environmental factors, which is going to require extensive, ongoing analysis to fully understand. So, what is the immediate path forward? Well, it requires a monumental logistical effort. Authorities have to locate the missing, deliver life-saving aid to totally isolated families, and monitor those blocked rivers to prevent secondary disasters. And eventually, they face the unbelievable hurdle of rebuilding critical bridges and border roads. It's a humanitarian and engineering challenge of epic proportions. Which leaves us with a really profound question. As these incredible landscapes continue to rapidly shift and change, how can humanity adapt? How do we safely live, build, and travel in the world's most sensitive mountain regions? This 2026 tragedy is just a devastating reminder of how quickly the Himalayas can rewrite the map. Our deepest sympathies go out to all the families affected as these daring rescue operations continue.